Hey, welcome to the Pharmacy Residency Podcast, a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. Again, I'm doing letters of intent in 24 hours. Usually it's actually even less than that. But what you do is you just sign up at residency.teachable.com for the letter of intent and then send me your LOI, CV, and the website link for your top choice. I'll fix it, send it back pretty quickly. But we're kind of making the transition now to kind of talking about interviews as we move to January, and some of you will be getting the first interview invites, and it's going to be a great moment, and it's also going to be a terrifying moment because now you are on the line. You've done it. You've gotten your interview, but now you have to beat out those people that you're interviewing with. And what I've heard is that when you're in a group of maybe 8 people or 6 people or whatever, usually based on the numbers that they're going to interview, if you win your group, you win and you get the interview. So you would think, okay, they're going to kind of put let's say there's 32 interviewees, they're going to put all 32 and they're going to mark them from 1 down to 32. But we're humans, and it's actually very tough to remember what was number 7 and which one was number 21. It becomes really confusing. But when you have a small group and you can kind of take the top 1 or 2, then you should be in good shape. So the real frustration that comes with interviews is that you do the interview and you say goodbye, you send your email, you say thanks and all that, but then that's it. You don't do anything till March. So you don't hear back. You can't call them up and say, so how'd I do? Where would you rank me? It's actually, I don't call it illegal because it's not a legal thing, but you're not supposed to do that. So anyway, I want to talk about the interview prep and support course, and then I'll talk about a book that I did with Brandon Dyson and give you guys a listen to part of that. But the Rockstar Residency Interview Prep and Support, it's meant to give you an understanding of the points that you're going to be graded on in the interview, so that when you do the interview and you hear what the other people say and you see how you do and you see how they do, and you're going to be listening for certain buzzwords and keywords. I was president. Oh, that gets a lot of points. I presented at ASHP. Oh, that gets some points too, and so forth. But the biggest misconception is that the interview is singly scored. There are actually 3 things that you're going to be scored on. The interview that you think about, the case presentation, and then the case that you're actually going to work up. So that can go a third, a third, a third. It can have different weights. But often the interview you think about isn't actually what is getting the highest points. So again, I don't have time to go over it. That's why I made the course with over 3 hours of explaining just the point system and how to answer those 2 types of questions. Is it factual or behavioral? And that Rockstar is actually an acronym for parts of the answers that you're going to need to give. But if you just want to kind of get an idea of what's going on with the interview, I did a book with Brandon Dyson, and it's called The 100 Strong Residency Interview Questions, Answers, and Rationales. And pretty quickly after that, I did a phone interview survival tips book, and I said, why don't we just make a bundle and put them together? But because of the way Amazon's algorithm works, and that the 100 Strong Residency Interview Questions, Answers, and Rationales it just comes up first. And people are like, okay, I'll just click on that. And then they get that one. And I think 1,500 people got it, that book so far. And what happens is that this little guy, and if you're watching on the video, you can see this, the Residency and Phone Interview 2-in-1 bundle is right under it. That is that same book. And in addition, you get the phone interview survival tips, which is really just another book for virtual interview survival tips. I could have changed the name, but it takes a lot of work to do that, and it's the same thing. It'll help you with the virtual aspect. So go ahead and get the Residency and Phone Interview 2-in-1 bundle and get yourself an extra book for free. or for the same cost that it would be for one. And often you don't actually need to pay. So if you've never been on Audible before and you want to have a free book for 28 days, I think that's the magic number, you can go on there, and it's, you sign up for Audible for the monthly thing, and then you just cancel if this isn't something that you want. Though I found that most people that are going towards residency find that doing this for about 4 months, about the 4 months of audio, is really what you want, where you kind of get through this process as you're driving to your appies and back and just rehearsing the interview questions over and over again, and making sure that when somebody asks you a fact question, that comes pretty quickly. And then if you have a behavioral question, you're like, okay, I've seen an example of this one before. I've seen the answer before. But what I want to do in this episode is actually play you the audio from the book so that you can kind of hear what we have in terms of sound quality, because we spend a lot of money on this in terms of hiring the very best narrators. So it's not me and Brandon, although we did do an interview episode, which is pretty popular. We recognize that our skills may be elsewhere. So I'm just going to go into this one actually to make it a little bit easier. And you may notice that this is why is it doing that? That's weird. Okay. So I just want this guy. Okay, there we go. And let's go to the audiobook, which is, it's like $6. Or you can get it free. Okay, but I'm going to hit the Audible sample here. And then you can now listen to 100 strong residency interview questions, answers, and rationales. But get the bundle and get the other book, which helps you with virtual interviews as well.
I tried to relate to the student's goals as a specific practitioner. He was interested in pediatrics, so I gave him a calculations example with a pediatric patient to contrast it with that of an adult patient. I showed him a bit of what would be coming and how he would be able to apply it in practice.
Both of these examples are reasonable explanations of how you would teach, but don't require that you have had formal teaching experience. Number 19. How will you fit teaching in? You'll be busy. This is a question about prioritizing and organizing. Obviously, you're going to be extraordinarily busy as a resident. You'll probably precept students, especially if you're getting a teaching certificate, and you'll want to be prepared. Here's how you might answer the question even if you've never taught.
I'll start with the expression that if you lose an hour in the morning, you'll look for it all day. I want to tell a quick story about a resident who always made sure she didn't lose that hour. I appreciated the residents who took the time to teach me. I know how busy residents are just from my own rotation so far. I had one particular resident who's become a mentor to me. She went through what she was assigned to do, but also shared additional background literature in this AmCare clinic. I felt so much more prepared to meet with patients as I started to understand why we would take a particular approach. I want to mentor as she did. I mean, yes, it requires more work, but her method was to come to work a little early, not always an actual hour, to set up a teaching system so she didn't reinvent the wheel. She said it took a lot of time at first, but with that system, it made it possible for her to teach more, much faster. What I think worked as well is that when, as students, we saw how much energy they were putting in, we reciprocated, trying our best to give back by staying a bit later ourselves. She could have focused on her longitudinal projects, but it was clear she had a calendar for taking care of those a little at a time. I learned and appreciated not only the content I learned, but how she prioritized and organized her activities.
And we'll finish up with number 20. What qualities does your model preceptor have? This is a good question because it's self-reflective. Answering it well shows you thought about it. It's a window into what you like and what you don't. Similar to a trick question. You don't want your ideal preceptor to hold your hand the entire time. For example, she rounded with me every day and I felt very safe. Or that she kept you accountable rather than you demonstrating your autonomy and self-motivation. She made sure we worked up every single patient together and had every detail before rounds, and she was always on rounds with me. Sometimes the patients would ask me questions, but mostly they would ask her. Even if you did learn a lot by observing, That's not going to be a model preceptor. Also, if it is what you liked, that's not the answer you want to give on your residency interview. Remember, the goal of your residency is to get you to become that model preceptor. The goal is to turn you from a passive to an active practitioner who rounds making his own or her own recommendations. The interviewers want to know they'll be able to take a day off from time to time because they trust you. You can still pay homage to the preceptor who sheltered you, but articulate how you asked to spread your wings slowly. You might have had to ask for autonomy, but you developed into someone who worked on his or her own, and that's what matters. Here's an example.
I had an unexpected change in my schedule and landed in an internal medicine rotation. My rotations got shifted several weeks before, and it wasn't due to my institution or me. It just happened, so I rolled with it. I ended up being with a preceptor I didn't know and who didn't really know me, and it turned out he was going to be gone for the 4th rotation week in a 5-week block. Luckily, I had several rotations that fed well into this internal medicine one. I had built background skills, had hospital experience in psych, and had a good feel for things. What I appreciated about this preceptor was how he showed me his process for working up patients. He introduced me to the computer system, the nurses, the attending, medical residents, and medical students. I really felt oriented, for lack of a better word. He showed me where I could work so I could hang out on the unit and made me feel like part of the family. He did it all during the first week. Every week he met with me to check on things we could improve and to discuss how we would apply them the next week. This feedback was phenomenal. What I enjoyed the most was that he let me round by myself when he was gone the 4th week. He put the unit in my care. Obviously he had a pharmacist following up, so I had someone with whom I could ask questions and who was a resource. I worked on my patients and rounded with them, so I had autonomy. My preceptor trusted me enough to allow it, and it became the first experience where I honestly felt like a pharmacist. I want to recreate that for my students. That was really special for me.
So that was Gary Furlong and Michael Lenz, and hopefully getting you through those 100-strong residency interview questions, answers, and rationales. I think it's a great book and really easy to listen to on the way to and from your rotation. So need anything from me? Residency.teachable.com or TonyThePharmacist@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.